sure that they know and are aware of what we're doing. Now, we had a couple of examples of what people said here. The first lady was saying that the council wasn't very good. And so basically that before they had a social worker that was really good, would know that they were there, would come to speak to them, explain all of the services. All of a sudden, that social worker was removed. And with the removal of that social worker, they had no access to what the deaf club, to what the councils were doing. And what actually happened was that they closed the deaf club because of a council decision, which they had no access to. In the end, they set up their own forum in a pub, which was free, that they could get together and share experiences. But this was simply not good enough. But actually another lady that we had in Gloucester spoke about how their council is really good. They go to forum meetings every month. They have the opportunity to explain problems with the council. And actually the council say to them that they are very proud, they are very pleased to have the views of deaf people within Gloucester feeding back to how they can improve council services. So it's really interesting to see, you know, from the good to the bad. Now the key themes that we had, of course, is that we spoke about a range of things, but there were a few things that came up consistently throughout our conversations. Now one of those was training. So with training, what we meant by that was frontline staff actually having the training to be able to talk to deaf people within their council ward, having awareness of what are the issues that the deaf community are faced with. Because of course, if we have somebody that has no idea about what deaf people need, how to communicate with a deaf person, it becomes so difficult. And as part of the Equality Act, the councils have a responsibility to ensure their staff do have this awareness, have this training. And what was interesting is that we saw in certain areas there was training delivered, but there was no provision of things like interpreters. Now we know that in the past councils have delivered things like minicoms and technology, and that's always happened, but all of a sudden that has not happened quite so much. So we are finding that people are starting to fall further and further behind, because actually before, you knew where I lived, you provided me with key services and technology, and now we are having to actively find it, which certain subsections of our community find incredibly difficult. Now what's really important as well that we found that came through was citizenship, that all members of any council ward are an equal part of that council. It's important that they feel a part of the citizenship of the area. They don't want to be and should not be treated as second-class citizens within where they live, but they found that they were. Now the main theme that came all the way through with all of our investigation into access to council services was interpreters, and real problems with interpreters, from a lack of interpreters full stop, to interpreters being provided that weren't trained to be interpreters. So we explained that we felt it was really important that councils were only using NRCPD registered qualified interpreters. As the BDA, we came up with a list of recommendations for these local authorities. One of our recommendations was that they should implement the BSL Charter, which I'm actually not going to go into because that's what Robin is going to be talking to you about. We felt that frontline council staff should be trained in basic BSL skills as well as have deaf equality training. We felt that people should have their communication preferences logged so that interpreters, and if it was interpreters, they should be NRCPD registered interpreters. There should be consistent and continuous engagement with the deaf community. We felt that, for example, if there were local contracts provided to businesses, for example, let's say it was a taxi service, it's important that that taxi service is aware that there are deaf people living within that council ward, and they should have a text provision so that deaf people could send a text message to book a taxi, for example. So it's important on any contract, any grant that was handed down by a local authority, they considered the needs of deaf people. We also felt that it was very important that deaf people had access to specialist computer classes, and actually it might be something where they needed to have something different, where a specialist could come into the home and train deaf people on how to use computers. And we also felt that there needed to be specialist advocacy services across the regions to support the council with all of this. And I've actually just been told I've only got 5 minutes, so I'm going to have to move on very quickly and give you a quick overview of access to health services. Oh, I have a little bit more time, so that's good. Thank you. Right, so that was councils. If you want more details, then obviously you can read the report. Now, access to health services. This is obviously a very, very hot topic of conversation within the deaf community. So we spoke about accessing GP surgeries. So the main 4 themes that came through was waiting in reception areas, having good communication with GPs, the suitability of interpreters, and also good practice on GP surgeries. So we had so many case studies of people's experiences. Now, one lady said that she couldn't have an interpreter, so she wanted to talk to the doctor. She wanted to do this, she had to end up doing this in written English, and she just had no confidence to be able to do that, to get her point across. The second one here is talking about how they booked an interpreter. The GP said, you should have booked an interpreter. You should have brought one with you. How can I do that? Well, you should call an interpreting agency. Again, how can I do that? So in the end, that person walked out of the GP surgery. Now, what was important is they wanted interpreters from within the local region. They wanted interpreters from within the local region because they'd know the local regional variations of the signs that they were using. They didn't want to use interpreters from outside the region.
Yeah, I'm the truth there.
And they wanted to use interpreters from Communication Unlimited, a particular agency, because this gentleman knew their interpreters. So this person, upon arriving to the GP surgery, asked for evidence of their NRCPD badge, which they didn't have and they didn't show. And actually he said he was so angry that he wasn't being pacified, they didn't understand his concerns, that he actually felt like punching the staff here at the GP surgery. And it actually took his wife to calm him down because of the attitude that was so bad. Now, we had a look across good practice to see examples of good practice. Now, we had a lady from Birmingham say that their GP surgery actually knew her. And because they knew her, when she had to go to the hospital, they were able to coordinate services and provide interpreters consistently. Now, we had another gentleman from Surrey that said his communication with his own personal GP was awful. And actually, he had a stroke, he was in hospital, and a priest turned up at his bedside. Now, he thought, he's here to give me the last rites, that's it. There was no interpreter, he didn't understand what was going on, and actually it was nothing to do with that. But without that communication, you can understand just how terrified that made him. So now we spoke about accessing hospitals. We've spoken about GPs, and then it was about hospitals. So we spoke about visiting in the reception areas again, communicating with doctors, operations, post-treatment, and so on. Now, we spoke about communication and areas of good practice. So we had somebody who spoke about the hearing aid clinic, and he said it was awful. What they would do is they would close the shutters, and they would talk to other people, and then they would shout names from the other side of the room. Now, this is a hearing aid clinic. This is a hearing aid clinic. They know this person is profoundly deaf. Now, good practice. We had another person, a lady from Sweden, who said, I have no problems at my hospital. If I ask for an interpreter, they put me an interpreter. And as a result, she feels very confident in the service that she is about to receive when she arrives. So in summary then, across the access to hospitals and GPs, so the key things were there were significant problems with the booking system, that the reception areas, the waiting rooms were not good enough. The medical jargon that was used with doctors was not clear, And actually, when it comes to interpreters, we saw this time and time again, that there was no interpreters booked. It was a very, very difficult request seemingly to put through. They wouldn't know where to go. And this just happened consistently. Why is there not a registered system that doctors, GP surgeries, hospitals can use across the country to ensure that interpreters are used? And as we said with the waiting areas, there needed to be some kind of visual cue as to when that person's appointment was ready. Medical jargon, as we've said, just too complicated in terms of basic communication, and also interpreters, as I've already explained. So in terms of what we, as the British Deaf Association, recommended that they should have, we said that they should ensure that any policies that they have, they should look to develop them, they should look to have training, they should look to ensure that all staff are aware of changes and development of policies to ensure that they comply with the Equality Act 2010. We also suggested that they should sign up to the BDA's BSL Charter, which again Robin will explain to you when I hand over to him. And we also said that actually sometimes just having the very basic BSL skills can make such a difference to somebody feeling more comfortable in a waiting area or in an appointment. And we also felt that deaf equality training was very much needed. And in these systems, communication preferences of patients should be recorded. And if that's an interpreter, interpreters should only be used if they are registered and qualified with the NRCPD register. We've said that there should be an increase of at least 15% of people, surgeries that are using BSL videos on the NHS Choices website. And also we said that CCGs, NHS Trusts, local health watches should be fully engaged with their local deaf communities so that they are fully aware and up to speed with the issues that their local deaf communities are facing, whether that be interpreters or anything else. We suggested these local health watches, because they are independent from these CCGs and NHS Trusts, so they should be very much on side with the local deaf communities. We should have a voice with these local health watches and ensure that there are research is conducted of good practice and to ensure that all other authorities are abiding with these. Now, we want to say a very big thank you to Mike Webster, the chairperson of the EBDJ, for allowing us to do this research. Now, I think we're very pressed for time. I don't know if we have time for questions, do we? Maybe 5 minutes of questions, please.
Hi, my name is Sylvia Simmons. Thank you for your presentation, James. I'd like to ask a question. I'd like to ask, what is your long-term plan? You've already told us about past achievements. That's very good, and I appreciate you explaining to us. But I have to say, I think about my parents who are both deaf, and I think about the suffering that they had. I was lucky that I was there to have the skills to really help and fight to make sure that they had a dignified time as they became older and closer to death. And they don't have the ability to do that. And I had to really fight to get good health services there. I think there needs to be a good strategy of an access plan. So what is your long-term plans to improve the strategy?
The table, please.
Well, as we all know, the British Deaf Association are a relatively small charity, and we look to work with others in partnership. Now, we have already spoken to ROD, and they have their benchmark for elderly people in care homes, deaf elderly people in care homes, where they can go and ensure that these care homes that have deaf people residing within them are meeting this minimum standard, minimum expected standard, so that ROD can give them that benchmark. Now, I'm happy to share that in terms of residential care for elderly deaf people. This report that we have managed to put together, we will be sharing with ROD, and we will also be sharing with Age UK, because something that we see on a regular basis is that Age UK are delivering great support, but they're not providing support necessarily in terms of interpreters, BSL English interpreters. And we want to be able to show Age UK that actually deaf elderly people are part of your community and a part of your remit as Age UK as well. Now, what's really important is that when we see elderly people in hospital, it becomes really very tough, because the NHS now is split into so many different departments. We have a checklist, which Robin, I know, will be explaining when he delivers his presentation, with something that he has done in Derby as part of the BSL Charter, where we have a checklist and they can ensure that access has been considered and has been achieved. Now, this checklist delivers the opportunities for hospitals to be able to see what it is that they should be doing. Are they doing? Now, this is incredibly important, because we need to make sure that what we are delivering is used with lots of deaf people. So this is really important that we show, and we have case studies of a number of deaf people, and we can show the difference it would make to them. They won't listen if we only come forward with 3 or 4 deaf people in the examples of 3 or 4 deaf people. So we are already working on collating that data and that evidence to ensure we can make a strong case. Now, what I'm thinking is that it might be worth having all of the questions and then summarising a general answer. Do you think that will work in terms of the time that we have available?
Good morning, everybody. My name is John Dennerly. That's my surname. Listen to what Sylvie's point was. I also had the experience with my parents and what happened with them. And I think if you look at social care over the last 20 years or so, the service has really deteriorated, and we need to try to build our relationships with social services and improve things in the future so that deaf people can gain their confidence in using it. I think it's really important that we need to educate the staff, and we need to give them the confidence to be able to engage with the community. There's so many cuts of services that happen, and yet there's legal acts. You know, over 20 years of legal acts that have been enshrined, they're just not used in practice, and people aren't using them. I think, you know, in the future, the BDA needs to think long term about how to lobby local authorities and health authorities, and to work in partnership to set up advocates in local areas and start to get the deaf community coming as representatives. Because sometimes there's only 1, 2 or 3 people who will turn up. It could be because of lack of motivation, but it could be because they've never understood the process. They've never understood what they have to do in the structure. So I think the BDA does need to really think about their strategy of supporting deaf people to build the self-confidence of the technology and being able to get used to the staff at the health authority. You know, there is using technology where you can use sound video and different types of videos to be able to use the health service, and we need to build the self-confidence of the deaf people to be able to use technology to access health in a different way. So we need to lobby more health authorities, like what York has done for good practice, because in spite of the cuts to funding, we need to think of innovative ways to improve access using technology in a long-term plan.
So a very important point there that John has made is, what are we looking to do to improve moving forward? Now, we have to be realistic and understand that we can't do everything as a small charity, but one thing that we would like to empower the community to do is have that ability to complain. I think as deaf people, we have become so used to saying, it's okay, never mind, oh dear. Actually, we need to start standing up for what we need, for our rights, and to complain, not just one person. If there's one complaint or two complaints, they won't realise the change that needs to be made. So actually, we need to have all of these people that are telling us the same thing. If all of these people stand up, feel empowered to be able to say so, then we'll get somewhere. It's like this campaign that we have with the Our Health in Your Hands campaign. Now, what we are saying is we have the Equalities Act on the one hand, and we have the service that we are being delivered on the other. Now, if they don't meet in the middle, we need to be taking people to court. We need to be taking quite severe legal action to make a stand. We have, as the British Deaf Association, we have solicitors ready. But what we need is a number of complaints to be able to continue and start that act. Right now, I've spoken to the solicitor and said, with what we've got, can we take these health authorities to court? And what they've said just now is you don't have the numbers. So we need you to feed into this.
Hello everyone, my name is Tony. There are three things I wish to say about social services, about health, and about the GP doctors and the counsellors. Just make sure. When you look at some GPs and health authorities, they have all these different languages that are up on the board. Polish, all these different languages. And I said, what are all these languages there for? He said, oh, we translate everything into these languages for people. I said, oh yeah, and what about BSL? And they all say the same thing, oh, we don't know about that. And they pass the buck, and nobody takes any responsibility for it. You know, why are there numerous foreign languages that things are translated into, but not BSL?
BDA.
As you can see from the reactions of people in the room, I couldn't agree more. Now that is what we need. We need more of that, Tony. We need people like you to come forward and give us those complaints. Give us those complaints. You know, I think the complaints, they take place in the local deaf club, over a drink, over a cup of tea. Actually, these complaints don't need to take place in the deaf club. They need to take place in the courts.
Yeah. Okay.
Hi, my name is May Lambert, and I'm from just outside Manchester, Trafford area. Just to pick up on the issue of interpreting services, and I know we've been asked to come forward with our complaints, but my question is, who do we complain to? Who should we forward these issues on to? Because we don't get any information about where to direct our complaints to. So I suppose that's my first question. My second question is mainly a point around an issue that when I attended a hospital appointment with my husband, we received an interpreter for this appointment, and back years ago, I would go to an appointment, I would know the interpreter, whereas now I go into a waiting room and I've got no idea who I'm going to be met with, if I'm going to be met with an interpreter at all. There was one occasion where an interpreter came over and asked whether we were deaf, and I said, yeah, it was my husband's appointment. And she said that she was actually a training interpreter, and straight away that frightened me, if you like. Around the lack of training that this lady would have had to prepare to attend this hospital appointment. This is a major concern for myself, because I really think that this provision is not good enough. What I would like to see is, if we do have training interpreters working within the NHS, that they are mentored and they are accompanied by somebody that is qualified for the job, to look at how they're actually operating in this arena.
Hello everybody, I'm Billy Lambert. I'm the husband she's just been speaking about. She's stolen some of my thunder, so I won't have to say all the things I was going to say. we moved to Trafford, and the health service and different authorities that were in Trafford, we were involved with the PCT, the local authority, we lobbied all of them. And about 15 years ago, Trafford bought 32 mini-coms. They put them out in every GP practice in Trafford. And deaf people were over the moon. But technology moves on and changes. And the text phones become moribund and no one was using it. But they didn't have the funding to be able to keep up with the technological advancements. Now that we focus on interpreters, I regularly go to doctors for my diabetes and cancer. I'm regularly going to doctors. I'd say probably for 9 years or so, I've been using the same interpreter to go with me when I go to the hospital. And the health and paper interpreter, the Trafford have been great. Unfortunately, the NHS has now changed the structure. And now, Trafford has to go into Manchester. And it's all changed the policy. So recently, when I went to take my interpreter, they said, we're not going to pay for your interpreter to come. You must book through an agency. And the agency will choose. And I said, well, this isn't right. So now what I've got to do is, I've got to ask for an interpreter. And I say to them, this is the name of the person I want. It's the person who's known my health history. And they never, ever have done the person I've asked for. They just pick whoever they want to turn up. And as my wife said, some of the quality has been awful. I've had trainees. So we need to do something about this. Because where is my human rights? Where is my right to choose? Where is my right to be comfortable with someone in health settings? I've got a meeting on Wednesday with the head of the Health Authority in Manchester. But we need some sort of information that we can show them that deaf people have a right to choose who they want and who they feel comfortable communicating with, because it's really depressing. In the last year and a half, I've had 9 different interpreters, and it's just been a really awful experience, and I want it changed.
I don't know whether I should answer that. Actually, I think we have two further questions, so let's hear those questions first.
Hi, my name is Carol from Manchester. I come from a deaf family, and I just really want to share with you my bad experience. You know, I know you've asked for complaints to come forward. I've sent some information through via English via another person, and that's been escalated to the correct person. However, it then always goes back to PALS. The experience I'm listening was about 10 years ago. I think that, you know, in my experience, it all went terribly wrong. PALS really struggle. We need. They don't understand what we need, and I think it needs to go back to educating them.
Do you know, I remember policy 10, 20 years ago, it was better then. And I'm sorry to say, but not only is it worse now, but it's getting worse because people live longer. There are more older deaf people. You know, there's lots of organisations, councils, who rely on computers. There's a lot of older deaf people who don't know how to use the computers online. And that's it. I think we've got to face up to it. The things will just get worse and worse.
Hi, my name's Elizabeth from Bristol. Really, I wanted to focus on the Health and Council presentation. I think it was a great presentation. However, what I want is support from the BDA for older people. You know, there's nothing against the youth scheme or the youth initiative, but I do think that older people are left and they don't know where to go for support. I know David Buxton has spoken to me about the provision for deaf older people, and they've said, you know, there's EDDG, there's other organisations and other support mechanisms in place. However, I do think that we need to focus on the older generation in terms of what we can do to support them.
Okay, firstly, I'd just like to say thank you for all of those questions and comments. I would just like to respond to that last question that was just heard. The staff yesterday, we had an away day and we spoke about how we can improve our services for the elderly deaf community, and that's something that we are looking to do. What I can't do is stand on this stage and promise you that as of tomorrow it will all be sorted and fixed, but we are certainly looking to do that. Now with May Lambert and her point, she was talking about her experiences, as well as Billy, her husband. Now, for me, again, this comes back to what I was talking about before, about having your support. Now, we've been involved with the Our Health in Your Hands campaign. And as part of this campaign, we've had 7 different charities come around a table to work together. We haven't had much by way of a budget, but what we have done is look to create resources whereby deaf people can use templates, letters, standardized templates, where they can just fill in their name, they can give that to the GP reception and say, listen, here, I need an interpreter. And that template will do that. It will say everything, it refers to all of the legal messages that they need to follow. So that's really important. Now, I know fundamentally another question that was raised is that ultimately it comes back to PALS and the PALS service. But I would recommend personally that you should set up local forums in your own areas to be able to really drum up interest to campaign against your PALS services locally. Because if we only have one person in one area, that is really very difficult. Now, what I will say is that Robin is going to come up. He's going to talk about the BSL Charter. And if we all get involved, we can have a domino effect and really get where we want to be long term.
Thank you, James, for your presentation. Do you have the presentation on the exhibition stand? If you do want to take a copy, please do so. Okay, hopefully that's some food for thought to take back to your own area. Obviously, we know that the older generation is an expanding group. It's a growing group, and we know that a larger group will also come with a lot amount of power. You know, and we wonder whether these items are transferable to the deaf community. But as I say, Robin Ash will now share with you his presentation regarding the charter.
Hello everybody, make sure I stay on this spot. It's nice to see you. Some I haven't seen for a long time, some I've seen recently. I think from what we've already heard about the BDDJ, and what James has said about, you know, it's been fantastic being able to work together and talk with lots of people, sound safe in places. People have asked about why we've done this. Let me go back and set up the context for you. When we look at health services and council services and the issues and problems that people have, the councils always say, where is your evidence? Well, now we've got it. So thank you for the old people who gave up their time. And you know, they could have been playing bingo or dominoes, but they gave up their leisure time to give us the evidence of their anecdotes and their testimony of what's happened to them. And we've now got hard evidence that we can show local government, health authorities, and we can show them our report that there is a huge disparity in the experiences that deaf people have in health services in local councils. So it's really important to have that report. But what are the resources? So what's the solution? What do we do next? You know, what's the best idea? How can we best resolve it? This is why we're going to go on now to talk about the BSL Charter, because this is what can start to help turn us over. We've only got a short amount of time, so I'm going to sign it with real speed. So if you miss anything, come see me after this. I'm more than happy to talk to you about it at lunchtime or any time this afternoon. But I'm going to try and focus on these points about the BSL Charter's 5 pledges. And we're going to ask the councils if they can sign up to these pledges. And some of them are very indifferent about whether they can or not. But let me talk you through the 5 pledges first of all. And people say to me, well, you know, this council signed in it. It was a lovely photo opportunity, but where's the actions? You know, it's great to see it signed, but what happens afterwards? And what's the evidence of the effect that the Charter is having when it's being signed? Well, in the East Midlands area where I am, it's thanks to the deaf community. You may have seen some material. You may have seen it was in the British Deaf News about it. We showed some photographs. And it's really good to celebrate when councils sign the Charter. And we want more to sign it. We want the British government ultimately for them to sign it as a government of the United Kingdom. But we need to look at what changes are coming. Now, the BSL Charter has the principle, the founding principle of access, giving deaf people participation and access at a local level to where they are. That's what we want to happen. We want them to be able to access the structures that are in their areas. And here are the 5 pledges. It's access to services. It's promoting learning high-quality teaching with British Sign Language. There are so few courses now in college. In the old days where there were loads of colleges that did BSL courses. And you go to whole raft of places. Parents could go and learn to sign with other people, but now there are less courses. There are less places for parents to go and learn sign language. So we need to promote high-quality teaching with BSL. And the lessons. We need to support deaf children and families because they are our future. And also, we need to ensure that staff working with deaf people can communicate to an effective level. Not just, my name is. Actually communicate. And finally, this is always the mantra of the BDA, we need to consult with you, the deaf community. That's absolutely paramount. Whoever we go to talk to as an authority, they're not asking us what we think. We say to them, don't ask us what we think. Ask your local community what they think. Receive their views, because the community is not one hegemonic group who all share the same views. You need to ask your community what they think. So the councils and the health authorities, once they sign the Charter, they're committed to trying to achieve the goals of the Charter. And this was what I was talking about in the British Deaf News. It's brilliant to see Bristol City Council sign the Charter. And it was wonderful that they signed it. It is good sometimes to look at successes, to see what we've achieved, and to look at what changes have been made. And then you see the amount of councils that have signed the Charter since 2003. Now, the councils and the health authorities that have signed, here we are up on screen. I think we can move on, we don't have a huge amount of time. There's some more organisations. Everyone that not include Deaf Society. It doesn't have to be a council or a health service. It can be a deaf organisation, because deaf organisations are providing these services to deaf people. They're providing in terms of services, so they also should aspire to reach the benchmarks as well. And it's wonderful to see that Nottinghamshire Deaf Society signed the Charter last week, and they're the first deaf organisation to do so. So I think I'll explain it. You might have thought that was odd to see a deaf organisation. And in the pipeline, more organisations that we expect to sign here, and there are more still. So usually deaf people think, that's not my area, that's not my area. And I think really it's important that what happens is once one signs, it has an effect that you can use it as a precedent and say to another organisation, look, they've signed, can you sign? And at first organisation signs, and it spreads the word now. They tell other organisations, and we can also tell other organisations. And there are going to be more organisations, Leicester, and Derbyshire, and around the United Kingdom. And people say, look, how does the Charter actually work? Because there's the voting opportunity, there's the sign of the Charter, and you need to try it actually such a possibility. Let's go back. There was a lot of suspicion between the deaf community and the councils and the health authorities. The deaf people rightly felt that they'd been dismissed and looked over, and they've lost that engagement and that confidence. Signing the Charter and making fuss of it actually shows that we've brought that partnership back again. The deaf people need to share the responsibility to support that relationship. It's just not about demanding what we want from them. It's also about engaging with them, participating. It's great when you see them sign a charter. And one person said to me, it's really good to see those signs. It's great, and hopefully, we should celebrate when a council signs it and when they are committed to improving the services. We do have to make sure it's not just about the sign, but their actions do see it and improved. So I've seen some deaf people trying. And you may ask, and what's happened is they're watching the council sign the charter, and they just think it's amazing that they've never felt that they've lived in an area where they've been truly recognised as individuals, and they've always had to go through other organisations, deaf organisations, but now the council directly look at them and recognise them, and they can directly access council services themselves, and they felt like an equal member of the place that they lived in. When the council sign the charter, there are actions that they commit to, but they're not going to change overnight. It takes time, and we need to say to the council, ask the deaf community where they see the gaps, what they think can be the ways to resolve an issue. Because putting the service, it's not just about putting the service, it's having a novel way to think of other ways of being able to do things where we can meet the needs of deaf people. And it's having an action plan. And after being able to sign the charter, we need to have an action plan so that we can actually set goals and we can see over time how people do. Because really, we need to make sure that all of the departments become responsible for what they do, how they behave. So it's not just the council as a whole, it's each department. And it's them asking the deaf community, is this what you want? Has this met the needs that you asked for? And the deaf community can answer, no, we need more of this or less of that. And we need to then review the implementation of the charter. And we need to keep checking it. We need to remember that there are different ways to do things in different councils because we don't always share the same structure. The health authority has different structure to the council, and sometimes we've got to make sure that the charter is bespoke to that local council, to that local authority. Because the ultimate aim is that the service is improved. How we go about it might be different from place to place. So we've got to have a bespoke service for each area. And there's the action plan. And people say to me, well, when we sign pledges, does that mean we'll do all of these things? I mean, as I say, it depends on the health authority, or the police service, or the council. They may opt out of certain aspects. There may be a council that says, well, look, we're going to commit to 2 of these, because they're the things that we're responsible for in our structure. We're not responsible for the other things. They're outside of our jurisdiction, but we can pass it on to the other authorities, and we can ask them to do it. James was talking before about one example of legal aid and attachments on a local level, courts, solicitors, and access to those things. There was one person who refused to interpret repeatedly and then needed free legal representation. And it refused managing fees, and they said, they didn't just themselves as detectives, they couldn't go below. And that's a really challenged the decision to refuse legal representation. And they found that local council had signed the charter, so they were able to go back. And where the council said, oh, it's not our responsibility, it's not our jurisdiction, they went back and said, actually, it is, because you fund that group with our legal representation. You have signed the charter, and seeing as you fund them, you are primarily responsible to making sure they do the charter. So when we went back to the meeting, when they tried, they were very reticent to refuse to accept, we said, hang on, your primary fund is the council. The council signed the charter, you're failing your duty to what you have to do. So, what we take you one way to achieve our to achieve that. So how we improve services in the future is important, and how we resolve it is in different ways. The council give contracts out to mainstream schools, to other organisations. If the council sign the pledge, and there's a need to make sure there's quality to all groups, we're able to say to those organisations, you signed the BSL Charter, you said that there will be access, and you need to now make sure that there is a quality of access. So it's important that we can use the privately funded as the council, we can use that to leverage local organisations to do things. So the BSL, as I said, is an action plan there that you can see. We look at how we continue to improve the timescales. We decide on the timescales, we discuss with the deaf community what they want. Is it about placement, is it about specific things in their area? Because there are specific areas where deaf people say, we empower them to make the decisions for themselves. And it's about cascading down from central government to local government and right down to the people making local decisions for themselves. So consultation is really important. And Nottingham deserves the credit that they have achieved. They have signed the charter. And from Nottingham, we really got to say huge thanks to them. And of course, especially Gloria Pollard, she was instrumental in helping Nottingham Council to sign the charter. And with Gloria, with ourselves, it was a hard fight. And it was a challenge to try and make them think of how they could move forward and improve the health service in the Nottingham area. And Nottingham started to have a sort of deaf people started to say, we can't do this, we can't do that. And then the council was shocked to see where the gaps were. And when Nottingham signed, we were able to use their signature for other councils and say, look, Nottingham signed, we want you to sign. And very quickly, so overnight 6 councils signed because Nottingham signed. So working together, we try and bring those 6 together to work together and to talk to the deaf community. So consultation is key. We all came together and met in Nottingham, which is what this photo is. And we were able to create a ammunition for what we wanted to throw at the new councils and to provide the evidence so that they would do things. And then we said, right, we don't just want you into promises now and you walk away. We want a commitment to when you will come back and we can review things. And we said, you come back in 6 months and we want an annual feedback about how we're improving things, how things will be. And that's the Joint Council at Florida there that we had in Nottingham. And it was great to bring everyone together. And we talked about what was happening in the councils. We were able to meet the councils as well. And some of the councillors that were there, they have their voting buttons and they have their microphone buttons. And they're pressing this button and that button. It's just a fantastic opportunity to sit in a council chamber and to feel that we were being spoken to with a very equal representation in the chamber. And deaf people were able to express their views and to have an open, equal debate with the councillors in the chamber. And we move on to the next one. Now, there's a map. There are many more councils that haven't signed yet in areas where we live. And I know from the emails that I've had, and I know what people have said to me. I meet people every day and they say, my area hasn't signed. Now, I've run out of time. I wanted to talk to you more about the model you could use to implement in your area. But remember that you're not by yourself. You're in a community. And when we start to operate with the councils, we have other people you can ask to support you. And we can also assess and think which is the best way to go about reaching your council and what's the most effective way in your area to reach the health authority and councils. Unfortunately, I've been told I've run out of time, but I am going to be here all afternoon, so come and chat to me. Thank you.
Sorry, I will have to be quite strict with timekeeping because we are running over. You have created a lot of food for thought for our delegates in the audience. I can see you had a good night's sleep, you were full of energy. So now it's time for lunch. What I need you to do is register at the registration desk for the AGM. We'll only have half an hour for lunch, so if I can ask you to come back at 1:30 for the commencement of the AGM. Thank you, Robert, for your presentation, and thanks to Jane as well.
You should grab some food. Mate, you should grab some food too. Yeah. Okay. W. Oh my god. I prefer doing this than the stuff. I prefer working. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Sorry.
Nothing.
I have the check.
Yeah, can you hear it?
Oh.
Good. Mine good. You good. Covered behind it.
Oh my gosh.
Okay. What version is that?
What you doing? Yeah. Sure.